As I queued with 85,000 other Spurs fans on Wembley Way last night, sweating our way towards Wembley Park Underground, it dawned on me. Supporting our beloved club on a big occasion is like waking up on Christmas morning to a pair of well-made but unspectacular Marks & Spencer's socks. The build-up to the day was great, but you knew it was never going to be the PlayStation you really wanted. This is your e-Spurs podcast.
Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Tottenham!
Hi guys, welcome to a later than usual e-Spurs podcast, your weekly fix of all things THFC. Recording on a Thursday this week to include the Monaco game, of course. Don't forget to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Acast, and you'll get every new episode direct as it's released. Whatever your social media preference, we've also got that all covered. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at @e_Spurs, and you can like us on our Facebook page, facebook.com/eSpurs page, and our YouTube page, where you'll find not only the podcast each week, but also our new eSpurs classic videos. On tonight's eSpurs podcast, we'll be talking about our return to the Champions League on Wednesday night and why Spurs failed to turn up to their own party. We take your questions for the eSpurs team on all things Hotspur, and to round off the podcast, we'll review our return to Premier League action against bottom club Sunderland on Sunday afternoon, Jermaine Defoe and all. To begin with, let's introduce the team that I'll be talking Spurs with tonight. It's Jason, Ricky and John. How you doing, lads?
I'm all right, mate. Not too
Good
depressed.
stuff.
I'm okay, thanks, Andy. I'm okay.
I'm all good, mate. The thing I love most, you know.
Brilliant stuff,
We'll be all
lads.
right.
Brilliant stuff. Positivity. And just to mention before we kick off tonight's podcast, we've got a competition running on our Twitter and Facebook pages. It's to win a 1981 FA Cup final replica shirt. Really simple to enter, guys. All you have to do is head to either our Twitter page at @e_Spurs. You'll see a tweet at the top of the page pinned there. Just retweet that tweet. Or if you're on Facebook, facebook.com/eSpurs page, just share the post and like the page. Really simple to enter. That's all you've got to do. No complicated questions. Just hit up our page on either Facebook or Twitter, and a 1981 FA Cup final replica shirt could be on its way to you. Also, to give a few people a mention, you know we like to do this each and every week. We've got people listen to us from far-flung corners of the globe. We really appreciate every single listen we get, guys, as I always say. So to mention a few of those, Diego Gonzalez, who's listening to us from Mexico City. Gary Spurs says he's from India. You guys are my mates while I drive to the office. I listen to you while I'm driving, and you give me a spurred start to my day. Thanks for listening, Gary. Also from Dagger Lurison, who's listening from, now I'm going to try and pronounce this correctly, forgive me Dagger if I don't, he's from Hafnarfjord in Iceland. Also Austin Holmes, who's listening to us, I know a regular listener from North Carolina, so there you go. Really appreciate every single listen we get, guys, and keep up the interaction you do with us, the questions you send in to us each and every week. So let's kick off the podcast, shall we? Now, a few of us on the podcast, all of us on the podcast, returned last night from Wembley Way when we eventually got down to the station after watching the game. And let's get the thoughts of the Spurs team, shall we, on the Monaco game, our return to the Champions League. Let's go first up to John. John, what did you make of... Let's talk about the occasion as well, shall we? Because it's a fantastic occasion. What did you make of the night?
Well, I had a really good day. I must admit, it was nice to get out early and, you know, meet up with some mates and travel up there. And it did feel, you know, it didn't feel like I was just going to football. You know, we all have the same match day traditions and obviously roots and what have you. And it was nice to be able to, not necessarily nice, but different, you know, to not go to White Hart Lane to watch Tottenham. It felt a little bit like a cup final. You know, you're going to Wembley, you got your Spurs shirt on and that. It was extra special. I did struggle to sleep the night before.
I thought you might, John.
But yeah, it was. Yeah. Listen, I enjoyed it, regardless of the result. What I wanted to be able to do was to be with my mates. I met Jason as well for the first time. He's over from Thailand, bless him. And you know, it was enjoy the Champions League theme and being in the stadium full of tens of thousands of Spurs fans. That was a really great feeling. And to be part of that record attendance, which I'm sure it won't last for long, by the way, because hopefully Bayer Leverkusen will bring a few more than Monaco did last night. But yeah, I must say my overriding feeling from the night, taking every result and occasion out of it, it brought home to me last night how much I love White Hart Lane and how much I'm going to miss the place. It really did, because I'm walking down Wembley Way after the game. I'm obviously annoyed because it took 45 minutes to get down there. But I was like, I turned to my son and I said, "Listen," I said, "don't worry, 3 days and we'll be going back to the lane." And that cheered me up because I'm going on Sunday. I've got that to look forward to, and I'm dreading the future without that rickety old stadium in my life. I suppose a lot of people were going to Wembley last night thinking we're going to replicate and beat those Champions League atmospheres we had before, and I just think it's so different. The two stadiums are so different. I had already made my mind up it weren't going to be as good as the games against Young Boys and Inter and AC and even Real Madrid when we was already 4-0 down. That was still a decent atmosphere. I think you lose that kind of hostile, intense, feeling from a crowd where, it just felt a little bit diluted, a little bit watered down last night, and I didn't like that, to tell you the truth. I would have preferred it even if it was difficult to get a ticket, I still would have rather it had been at the lane.
Even with our hole in the corner, it does bring it home to you how much of a special place the lane is. I don't know about you, Rick, but last night I found it a bit surreal, the whole thing, the build up to the day, as John said, hard to sleep the night before, getting there at Wembley Park Station, the excitement, which is normally what you feel on a cup final day, and then walking down Wembley when it's starting to get dark. And I think the last time Spurs played a nighttime game at Wembley, a competitive one, was 1982. So, the whole thing, was a bit surreal, seeing the Spurs branding up outside the game. So it was a strange night, wasn't it? But before the game, certainly fantastic atmosphere outside the ground and the show that Spurs put on.
Yeah, I have to echo a lot what John has said. For me personally, it was a phenomenal experience, result aside. I have to say, for me, hearing that Champions League music surrounded by 85,000 plus Tottenham fans was something I'll never forget. And I'm glad I've got a video of it because I'll keep that with me for a very, very long time. In terms of the game itself, I don't think we can hide our fact that I just think we froze. From my perspective, we have got a young squad, and I know we can't keep labelling that as an excuse. A lot of those players I know have competed in World Cup finals and have, gone far in terms of club level, but this is a new occasion for the players. And for me personally, the players will learn as these games go on. The only way we can take experience and get better is by nights like last night. And I always think, as a team, you learn a lot more in defeat than you do in victory, and it will hold the team in good stead. I've got no doubt this team will progress. You look at the fixtures. Last night we had Moscow and Leverkusen draw, which obviously is an advantage to us. We're missing Danny Rose. I have to say this, Danny Rose for us has really, really shown, last night in particular, how much we miss him. And that's not criticising Ben Davies, because it's very hard to judge Davies in the space of one game, but you just see how much Rose gives us that impetus to really drive forward, and I felt we really, really missed him last night. So he's come back, can't come quick enough. Moussa Dembele for me was really one of the shining lights from last night. Him coming back on, there's no doubt for me we are a completely different team when we've got Dembele in the side, and no doubt he'll probably start on Sunday. So it was a good 45 minutes for him. And I just think, we have to use last night as a learning curve. Lucky we've got 5 more fixtures to really turn it round. I've got no doubt that we will. But like I think John said, for me, I will take out a lot of positives from last night. It did break up what would be normally the journey to White Hart Lane. And I think for us, generally, what we're going to have to find for the season that we're away from the lane is how we're going to have to use Wembley to our advantage, because there's no doubt last night it didn't play into our hands. But I don't want to use that as an excuse as to why we lost the game. It wasn't that reason. We wasn't clinical enough in front of goal. There's no doubt about it. Again, with slow start into the game, that really is becoming an undercurrent at the moment that Poch needs to eradicate. We are starting games too slowly. Why is it happening? Because, we have to look at the fact that it may be costing us points. We are having to recover points, look at like the Everton game, the Liverpool game, these points, we could possibly turn them into wins. So there is a lot of work to do. But for me, Spurs, we haven't got out of first gear yet. And that, for me, is a good sign. When you look at the league overall, we're still unbeaten. And this Champions League journey's got a long way to go. I
mean, I mentioned my journey home last night and moaning about how long it took me to get home. As someone who travelled a lot further than any of us over the last few days, should say, first up, welcome home, Jay. Welcome to England. How was your day?
It was all right. As John said, we met up. We went in the Torch, not far from Wembley Park. Had a brilliant afternoon. It felt like Bangkok weather. It was strange to see everyone in a t-shirt and shorts in September, and I even had to mop my brow once or twice. I thought, blimey, this seemed all for me. But no, it was a great day to as you say, to wander up Wembley Way to the stadium. We left to get into we wanted to get into the stadium, in 45, 50 minutes. I wanted to really soak it up. and I still enjoyed the day out despite the overall thing. But I think we can only really judge the success of Wembley after we've played all 3 games. Will we fill out for all 3? Will the atmosphere be, I think, a little bit better when there is, say, with Leverkusen, they'll bring more support. So if you've got that little bit more away support, that kind of bounces it back, doesn't it? I thought one of the things about the atmosphere, I suppose, that you looked at was that, at White Hart Lane, you have that concentrated area of vocal support. And as I said to you off air, I think last week, that was my one worry going to Wembley, that vocal support would get separated and you'd end up with small pockets of people rather than that one big following. And I think certainly when we go there for next season in the league, we really, as a club, they've got to try and find a way to get that real vocal area together. Otherwise, it will be a big problem next season, that's for sure.
Give Spurs their credit, the people in charge at Spurs. They certainly made an effort in terms of putting on a show. I think the surfing flags worked well. They certainly did, what they could to sort of, get the crowd going. But it's very hard, and it's very echoey, Wembley, as a venue. So you've got one section sort of trying to sing, and you don't hear it maybe till 10 seconds later, and then that doesn't. It's very hard to get any sort of singing going, concentrated singing going as you do at the Lane. As you say, I'm sure that'll come. Jay, apart from the £5 hot dogs at Wembley, which I suffered at half time, what did you make of the game itself?
I thought the game was a little bit flat for us, particularly in that period of between their first goal and up till Toby scored. I didn't think, I've seen the reports today that he said we started really badly in the first 20 minutes. I wouldn't say we started badly. We didn't necessarily press like we normally do, and we weren't as high tempo as we usually were. But if Son's chance goes in that gets kicked off the line after 7 minutes, we're 1-0 up. So I didn't think we started that badly. And then Monaco scored with their very first shot at goal. So I think where we started badly was for, say, the Liverpool game, where in 15 minutes Liverpool had 3 or 4 chances and we were hanging on a bit. But I didn't get the impression last night. And I think that goal kind of knocked the stuffing out of us. And then just as we started to then think, right, let's try and raise it, they then go and get the second goal. And I think that knocked us flat. But Toby got one just before half-time, and Dele Alli's an inch away from making it 2-2 going into half-time. But second half, I thought first 15 minutes, we had that head of steam up. But the disappointment was that we weren't able to keep that going. And I think Monaco, sometimes you have to give them a little bit of credit. They used their game craft to take the sting out of the game. They started to make sure they got the silly fouls. When they got the silly fouls, they made sure they took 20, 30 seconds longer than they should do to take the free kick. They disrupted the rhythm, and slowly but surely we petered out. And I suppose the disappointment in the second half was we didn't really work their goalkeeper enough. So even though we had chances, it's not like we missed an absolute hatful of chances. Their keeper come out of it without making a save in that second half, other than the tip over from Ali, which was 47 minutes.
I mean, certainly went. The second half pretty much domination, other than getting clear-cut shots on goal. Although Kane, as you say there, had a great chance. Didn't he? John, would you put it down to then the difference between the two sides on the night being that they took their chances and we didn't? Simple as that.
Yeah, pretty much. I would say that as much as the players showed a little bit of naivety, I think in certain aspects, I think us as fans did as well. Because I certainly expected us to go and turn them over easily like we did last season. But then I don't really know whether they put their first choice 11 out last season in the Europa League. It certainly seems that they didn't after watching them last night. I know they've had a couple of additions over the summer, and Falcao's gone back, and they've signed Kamil Glik from Torino. He's a really good centre-half. But I think it was just one of those nights where, on another night, we're winning that comfortably. To be fair, I think we've been due one, because I think we have got away with a couple of snatched draws from the jaws of defeat once or twice already this season, and I think that was maybe the early wake-up call that we needed, much as Newcastle at home was last season, if you remember, where we were unbeaten for 14 games. And I know we drew too many, but we needed a defeat to sort of wake us up. And I believe I'll get that same sort of feeling again this time around, that defeat last night will really wake us up, and we'll go and turn Sunderland over and do the same to Gillingham as well the next game. And I still think we're unbeaten in the league still. There's still so much to be positive about, and it's only 1 out of 6 games we played in the Champions League. I can still see us qualifying quite comfortably.
It's still a long way to go, isn't there? Still a long way. And the other result was great for us in a way, wasn't it? You know, and I've seen a lot of people say about Leicester's result last night, and I don't think you can really compare the two. I mean, Leicester were playing a team from the Belgian Juniper League, all respect to them, you know, and whereas we were playing the team currently top of the league in Liga. So, you know, I don't think you can really compare the two. Good luck to Leicester and enjoy their night. But I think in terms of the opponents, we were certainly facing the better opponent last night. And, you know, it's no disgrace losing to Monaco at all. I think what concerns a lot of Spurs fans, Rick, would be the performance and maybe the perceived lack of effort that came from the team last night. On such a big occasion, how would you explain that in such an important game for the club?
Like I think we've said off air that, you know, we spent a lot of money. Like all the fans, you know, going, you know, the day itself costs a fortune. It's not just the ticket; it's what goes into that day that costs a lot of money. You know, the travelling, you know, any merchandise you buy, food outside the ground. So it's very hard to try and put your finger on why the players didn't turn up. You know, for me, I don't think it was a case they didn't turn up. They just froze on the big occasion. And again, I will relay this back to the fact that we've got a very young squad. And people will point at me that, you know, well, they're a young squad, but they have competed in the World Cup. They have competed, you know, in Euros. You know, they have played, you know, some of the players like Alderweireld and Wanyama, they have played in the Champions League before. They have, but this is a different club. And in terms of the team we've got as a whole, it's not experienced at the level of Champions League. And they're only going to get this experience by games. So, listen, for me, these players have proven in the space of how long they've been together, you know, that we come back, you know, from defeats very well. And I think Poch's words were telling after. I know it's very easy to talk after a defeat, but he made his feelings very clear. If he could, he would have wanted to, you know, change the 11 at half time. So, I mean, that's quite a big thing to say, you know, bearing in mind how much these players are given to him. For him to say that is a big thing. He pulled no punches. You know, he said that there was a lack of passion. But for me, more so, it was that they froze on the big stage. It kind of, you know, Monaco turned up and ruined our party, if you like, because everything was so Spurs. It was such a phenomenal day itself. It's just a shame that result didn't go for us, because I think we couldn't have planned the day any better. But for me personally, like I think John says, it could be the perfect wake-up call we need. You know, what my concern was that going into that Sunderland game, we might have, you know, turned up to that game like the Newcastle game thinking we're just going to roll them over. Now we really do have a burning desire to turn that game into a win, because we really do need to kind of, if we can push on in the league, it will no doubt benefit our confidence, you know. And the Gillingham game as well, for me, that's a game we need to win. I've said it before, the cup games for me this season are so important to Spurs. You know, this side, they need to start winning trophies, and it's only the winning trophies that kind of gets you that experience in the Champions League. You know, it's the first time this squad has got into the Champions League, the first time. You know, we have to forget about the Redknapp team. It's a completely different team. There's not one player from that side that is here now. So it's all very well if we sit there and compare, you know, Redknapp's side to Pochettino's side. It's two completely different teams. We have to bear that in mind. But we've got 5 games left. And for me, you look at last night, on another given day, I think like the lads have said, we beat this team. So there's no doubt for me that we'll progress.
And Jace, just in terms of, I mean, we've just had a really interesting conversation off there about a few players in the squad players like Eric Dyer, Dele Alli and Christian Eriksen, who in previous seasons have been fantastic for Spurs, who've, you know, not let the club down at all. This season, their form's starting to become, it's hard to describe, isn't it? We certainly noticed a drop in their performance, shall we say. Is it time for some rotation in there, do you think?
Well, I think with you will see some rotation for sure over the next couple of games, not just Gillingham. I think you'll see a little bit Sunday. It wouldn't surprise me, for instance, if Wanyama starts with Dembele in those 2 central midfield rows, and it is the Eric Dyer that misses out on Sunday. But I didn't think Ali was that bad last night, I must admit. I thought, you know, he was an inch away from making it 2-2, and I thought he had his dipping volley early on in the second half, and he was certainly trying to get into the box and that as the game wore on. So, you know, no, don't get me wrong, it wasn't a vintage Dele Alli performance, but I certainly don't think he was our worst player last night. I think sometimes you have to bear in mind what the players have done. Just because 1 or 2 bad games doesn't turn them into bad players. And I think, you know, you have to show a little bit of loyalty to players and cut them a bit of slack. But certainly Eriksen's the one that gives you more worry, because it's now, you know, as we've said before, when he's not having an positive influence on the game, he doesn't have any influence. Now, as I just said about Ali, even though it wasn't his best game last night, there were still times when he looked like he could have scored and he was still working a goalkeeper, whereas Eriksen was just on the periphery of it all night. And in fairness, I thought Eric Lamela was also quite a poor game by his recent standards last night. But I don't think there's any real reason to panic. Players will have good and bad spells during the season, but I think you will see a little bit of rotation. But what you have to bear in mind with some of the players that aren't being picked, it's when they have had their opportunities, have they yet shown enough to warrant being in front of a player that can say, look, I had 35 good games last season. That's also got to be taken into account.
It's nice to have that bench now strong, isn't it? I mean, we spoke a couple of weeks ago about the bench looking particularly weak, and now it certainly doesn't. Look at the bench yesterday; it's looking a lot healthier. So, it's a good problem to have, that if players their performance does drop, you can shuffle the pack a little bit, and that can only surely be a good thing. We also got your reaction via social media, guys. We asked for your post-match calls on the game and what your thoughts were on the performance, the day out at Wembley, etc. And you guys have been great in sending those in to us again. And we're going to get those from the lads now. John, what have you got for us on the social?
First of all, I've got Nathan Farrar. He says Dembele should have started, even if Poch thought he could only give 60 or 70 minutes. I must admit, I did think he would start last night, Dembele, because, if we had him on from the start, then I know hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I would have liked to have seen him in there from the start, get a foothold in the game and maybe, get a lead and you can bring him off. Just
to defend Pochettino in a way, I suppose he's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't in that sense, isn't he? Because if he starts Dembele and then has a bad game, people are going to say, well, why'd you start him? He wasn't fit. So, in his defence, I guess that would be the argument for that. But yeah, great point.
I've also got Stuart at Chufty Badge 25. He says, the commentators on TV said Dele was man of the match for Spurs. What match were they watching? Musa should have started, not Lamela.
Yeah, and again, it's all about opinions, isn't it? It's I think, actually, watching the game, I watched the game, obviously, there, and then came home and watched bits of it on TV, and it does put another perspective on things. And even the commentators, I think, on TV last night echoed what Jason has said in terms of Dele Alli. I think the commentator said that Dele Alli had been one of Spurs' best players, whereas at the ground, I personally didn't think he'd had a very good game. So it's a really interesting one. It's all about opinions, as we say. Brilliant stuff. Okay, Rick, what have you got on the social?
Okay, so I've got Luke at Luke_WM, who says the game lacked pace, was the type of game we would need Nkudu. Poch left his subs too late. I think Wimmer deserves a chance.
And again, Wimmer, it'd be a risky one, splitting the two centre backs up that we've got, wouldn't it, Rick?
Yeah, you could argue what has Alderweireld or what has Vertonghen done wrong, really, in order to drop either of them. We haven't actually, apart from last night, we actually hadn't conceded from open play. So I don't think you could really look at criticising the centre backs at the moment. I wouldn't see any reason to drop them. Nkudu may have offered a different option. Can't knock that. But and then I've also got Stuart at Chufty Badge 25, who says Lamela puts a shift in every match, but no end product. Stole the ball when we were on the break, gave it away. And I think we've said that, haven't we? He had a bad game last night, but I think overall we have to say he's probably been our most improved player in the last out of the squad in the last couple of years.
He's a player with some big experience internationally in the Copa America. He's played at some of the biggest stadiums in the world in South America. So. It's a strange one, but again, he's not alone in the fact he didn't turn up, is he? And going back to the first comment, I'm not sure who it was, Rick, but one of the comments in there was about the pace in the side. Again, it's a comment we've made so many times, haven't we, on the podcast. Something I'd like to see personally is not just players with pace, but I'd like to see us move the ball around a bit more with pace. So instead of taking 3-4 touches, passing to the side, I'd like to see us just try and get the ball forward. I'm not talking about a Sam Allardyce type team, but I'm talking just move the ball around a bit quicker.
We may see with the introduction of Nkudu that may change the way we play. We haven't really got a real fast, pacey winger. And you could argue that based on what we've seen of Nkudu, I know it's hard to judge someone off YouTube, but he does seem to have that attribute where he is very, very pacey, and that may just be a different option for us. Obviously, it's time will tell, but, if you look at the summer we linked with Zaha, Zaha was, he's got all pace, necessarily technical ability, he may not be up there. So on that basis, obviously Nkudu looks very, very pacey. He does look like he's got that kind of technical touch. Whether he adapts to the Premier League, as quick as we want him to, well, that will be obviously again time will tell. But until he's given a chance, it will be a different option for us. So hopefully we may see him. I would think in the Gillingham fixture. That's when I think he may bring him in And like I say, if he's going to start him and Edwards, that would be quite...
I don't think, we want to put too much pressure on him because he's so young, isn't he? But certainly be good to see him alongside Nkunku, as you say there. Jace, what have you got on social media, mate?
I got from Joe Valalby at JAYAUBEE. Monaco played well, to be fair. We look complacent and slightly overwhelmed by the occasion. Hashtag COIS. And we got Craig at Harlow C. Didn't take our chances before they scored. Their goal knocked the stuffing out of the players, the fans, and made the atmosphere flat.
And that's, in terms of knocking the stuffing out of the team, that's exactly what you said there earlier, wasn't it, Jace? In terms of, we was playing well and looking like we was going to score right up until their goal, really.
Yeah, and as I said, flat was exactly the word that I describe it as. We can have a go at the players, didn't do this, but as the supporters, sometimes we have to really get behind the players and give them a little bit of a lift. And I thought, the first goal, as well as you can moan at the players, it knocked the stuffing out of the crowd as well, and that felt so quiet. So, sometimes that's the problem at Wembley, isn't it? Whilst you've got 50,000 people that won't see the game at White Hart Lane, there's 50,000 people that have never sung at White Hart Lane as well. And you kind of got that mentality.
Certainly an experience, wasn't it, all round. And look, as you guys say, quite rightly say there, positivity, we've got 5 games to go. It's not the end of the world. The other result went in our favour. And these guys are players that we know can, based on last season, we know they can do it. We know they can get us through these games, and some more positive results. Moscow next, I think it is, and then back against Leverkusen, which will hopefully be a really good night out with a win to reflect on as we walk back down Wembley Way. But listen, guys, thanks for sending in your comments on the game, and keep them coming in on e-Spurs Twitter and Facebook. Just use the hashtag e-SpursPod, all one word, and we'll read some of those out. Get them retweeted either on the Twitter and Facebook or read out on next week's podcast. Now, we've just done some of your comments. We also, your regular listeners to the pod, you will know we have your questions for the e-Spurs team, which is my favourite bit of the show each week, where you guys get the chance to quiz the e-Spurs panel. And as always, you've been great in getting your questions into us. Some really good ones this week. Let's go to John. Your first one is Addicted to Spurs at addicted_Spurs. He asked John, do you think Spurs will finish in the top 4 this season, and will we get out of the group, the Champions League group, I guess?
Well, I'd like to say yes to both of those. Obviously, that's what that's what would be a successful season, in my opinion. At this point, even though we lost last night, I still would say that getting out of our Champions League group would be the easier of the 2 assignments, but I don't see why not. No one fancied us to do it last year, and we done it, didn't we? So we're always the kind of team, although we're consistently inconsistent, and we always have been.
I hope that answers your question, Mr. Addicted to Spurs. Next question is from Liam at King Wanyama. This goes to Rick. Rick, he asked, how did the occasion last night affect Spurs? If we're talking about the Champions League, music, etc., will it be an advantage, he asked, playing away from home in the Champions League, do you think?
I think playing away from home is an advantage for us, full stop. If you look at our away record, not just under Poch, I didn't even go back as AVB. Our away record is phenomenal. We lost, I think, 3 times last season in the league away from home. There definitely is at Spurs. Now, you look at our midfield we've got there with, the options we've got in order to change it with Dembele, Dyer, Wanyama, Sissoko. We've got 4 massive midfielders there. And like I said before, Spurs, last night aside, we're not a team that will be bullied. And you can say in the past, Southern softies, get bullied off the ball, get trounced away from home. Well, this Spurs side don't get trounced away from home. Results have proven that. That's fact. So I do believe that the away fixtures in the Champions League will most suit us because obviously at home, as we know, I say at home when I'm referring to home, I'm referring to White Hart Lane. And even Wembley last night, it's pretty much 11 men behind the ball and break us down. And the problem is even more so when teams do score that kind of first, second goal, when we're at home, you even got it even more so that the teams just sit back. And let's be honest about it, we are finding it very, very hard at the moment to break down teams. And that's not, glossing over anything we don't know. We've shown this season that clinical-wise, we haven't hit it yet. So playing away from home for me will most certainly suit us. And I think, like John said, I fully expect us to qualify.
That's the main goal, I would think, isn't it, this season? I think we're all realistic in terms of top 4. It's going to be very tough this year. You've got these new guys going in, the media are raving about them, they're spending all this money. It doesn't equal success. but it's going to be tougher, I think, this season to get in the top 4. It's not to say it can't be done, because we showed that it can. Next question goes to Jay. This is from Spasoko at the Macboy. He asked, tremendous occasion overall, but were Spurs too optimistic or naive last night? And do you think Dembele or Wanyama should have been playing against the talented Monaco?
I didn't think he would start Dembele last night. I would have still gone with Wanyama and left it at that. But with the knowledge that we had a winnable home game, or an even more winnable home game, if you like, at the weekend, and then Gillingham afterwards, which was a chance to really then bring Dembele into the team. Were we naive? I think we showed a little bit of as I said earlier, a little bit lack of gamecraft at times of how Monaco really just sucked the life out of the game, particularly in that last 25 minutes. And it's something that we will need to learn. But that's one of the things, one of my old things about Europa League football. As much as people don't like it, we've still had 4 or 5 years of getting used to playing, against European sides and knowing how they react and knowing how different refereeing is in European games, knowing how different the pace of a European game is, knowing how difficult different crowds are around Europe. So, there was whilst we looked naive at times, there was no excuse to be naive. And we have to learn. But as we've said, there's 5 games left. And I think the important thing from our group, there's no whipping boy in the group. So that, if you're trying to finish in those top 2 places and you've got a whipping boy in it, as you look at, say, Celtic will be, Mönchengladbach and Man City know they're right up against it, battling the wave with each other. But in a group that we've got split, if we go to Moscow and pick up 1 point even, we're suddenly back in the group, because if Monaco win their game, they've got 6, they look nicely set, but that will leave Leverkusen only on 1 point, and Moscow will only have 2, and we'd have 1. So, suddenly the group doesn't look so bad, does it? There's a great chance of panic because you've lost on day 1. But I think as long as we go to Moscow, get a result, ideally you pick up 3 points, but even if we get a point there, and then say Leverkusen beat Monaco, then we're still only, we're still within touching distance, even with a point. So there's no need to panic yet. But we'll just need to show a little bit more gamecraft, I think.
Do you think that we might be seeing a case, and we spoke about this on the podcast also, the fact that it also buoys other teams, the fact that they know they're coming to, arguably the most famous football stadium in the world to play a Champions League game. Is there a case, do you think, that could work against Spurs and in the other team's favour, perhaps?
Well, it may well lift them and inspire them a little bit, but there's no reason why it shouldn't also lift and inspire your own players, is there? So I think, as Pochettino said, you can use Wembley as an excuse. It wasn't White Hart Lane. It didn't have quite the feel of White Hart Lane, but the game's on the pitch, and you just have to put those things. I think all those types of things are always brought up as an excuse when you don't get the result you want. Whereas if we'd have gone and win the game, nobody then talks about how, well, Monaco were inspired to come there. If they've lost 2-0, have they? Then everyone says, well, they were a poor side. And you think, well, they must have just been as inspired in the dressing room at kick-off time, whether they won the game or not. It didn't change their mind at minute 1. So sometimes the result kind of overclouds what people think of the mindset of players and things. But, if others are inspired by it, then there's no reason why Eric Lamela shouldn't have been inspired by it. There's no reason why, Dele Alli shouldn't have been.
Just to round off on the questions and the review of Monaco, I think we'll all agree, great occasion. Shame about the result. But that's Tottenham, isn't it? In a lot of ways, as John said, and that's why we love them, he says. Certainly a great occasion, and one that when that Champions League music played, as Ricky said earlier, as the lads have mentioned, those of us who didn't have a tear in their eye at the stadium, well, I don't think those were human if you didn't have a tear in your eye at the stadium when that Champions League music played. Fantastic. And a night, certainly before the game anyway, to make us all proud. But onwards and upwards and on to Moscow for the next Champions League game, as we do. Before we move on, just want to give somebody a mention, somebody who contacted our e-Spurs USA Twitter account. He says, my name is JJ. I love the podcast. I even have a Tottenham tattoo on my calf. Your podcast helps me get through my post-match emotions. I'm from St. Petersburg in the USA. Please give me a shout out in the beginning of the next pod. It would make me so happy and mean the world. Love your podcast either way. Cheers from Florida. Come on, you Spurs. That's from JJ Faustino 88 on Twitter. JJ, thanks for listening. And And on behalf of all the lads on the podcast tonight, we really appreciate you listening. I'm glad you enjoy it. Glad you enjoy what you hear and keep getting in touch and getting involved with the e-Spurs podcast. On to the preview, which is always our final part of the show each week. Of course, we come up this week against Sunderland, Jermaine Defoe and all at the Lane on Sunday afternoon. John, is this a 3 points we have to win?
It most certainly is, yeah, without a doubt. I think, especially after last night, we need to keep the ball rolling in the league. Stay up there in the top part of the league. And I think Sunderland at home, if you don't win, it's either got to be they've played out of their skin or we've played badly, and we can't afford to play badly again. We just can't. So I get worried when I get overly confident, but I'm overly confident. I tweeted last night. I won't use the swear word that I use, but Sunderland are getting it on Sunday. It's as simple as that. The fact that Monaco won last night would hopefully worry Sunderland because they are getting it. It's as simple as that.
Sunderland beware on Sunday. And John, I'll come back and get your prediction in just a moment to see what that is. Rick, in terms of Sunday's game, is in many ways the performance more important than the result, do you think? Or is it the result the only thing that matters?
People want to see that kind of free-flowing football that we had from last season. And it is a case that, hopefully, as games go on, we will have that. I think last season we have to mention that, if I'm right in saying the football wasn't that great at the start and we grew into the season. So hopefully, like I say, this time around, it'll be the same, but we have to get a result. And I think this game really is kind of reminiscent for me of the Newcastle fixture last year where, we didn't make the greatest start. We don't want another wake-up call. I'm hoping that Champions League game was the wake-up call we needed in order to kind of go into the Sunderland game ready and getting the 3 points. Because on paper, we've not made a bad start to the league. You look at the league, we're still unbeaten. We're right up there. So a result on, like I say, Sunday really keeps us going. And we have to look at the fact, Chelsea have made a strong start so far. You got, obviously, City, obviously have won all their games so far. United obviously lost to them. But it's important that we just keep amongst that top pack because if we can just hang in there like we did last season, pressure's off us at the moment. So that's the best thing for us. Whilst the pressure is off us in the league, we seem to perform. So the harder thing for us is going to be if we remain up there, it's when that pressure is going to be back on us. Can we perform? So it's integral that we take 3 points.
I think they're bottom of the league. They're probably going to come for a point if they can get it. Having said that, they've got that man Defoe up front. Jay, in terms of the team that we're likely to see on Sunday, what, if any, changes would you make to the lineup?
If it was me, as I said, I'd go with Wanyama and Dembele in the centre of that midfield. And I might bring Sissoko in on either the left or the right. He wants to play on the right hand side, so I might bring Sissoko in for a start. But I wouldn't go drastic. I probably would still have belief in Kane, certainly for Sunday's game, with the knowledge that Janssen can have a full 90 against Gillingham. I think, as we spoke off air, whilst Kane's taking a little bit of flack at the moment, Janssen, when he's been on the pitch, missed 2 big chances at Everton and he missed a one-on-one chance at Liverpool. So he's hardly gone banging on the door and scored 2 or 3 goals himself to demand a start over a Golden Boot player. That's not to say I don't think Janssen will come into the side and score goals. And I'm not trying to jump on the back of Janssen, but I'm not overly concerned still about Kane having got his goal against Stoke last week. So I'd probably still go with Kane on Sunday, and then we'll see where we are come the end of Sunday night. But I thoroughly expect us to win the game Sunday anyway. I saw Sunderland against Everton. They were a shambles in the second half, and I think they were so wide open and so easy to get at times that I think all their focus this week will be on trying to tighten it up. And I think David Moyes would almost take a 1-0 defeat rather than a 2-2 draw. I kind of get that feeling with him. He thinks, I need to sort the back four out before I do anything else. So
lost 3-0 against Everton, 1-1 against Southampton. They beat Shrewsbury 1-0, but then lost 2-1 at Middlesbrough in the derby there. And first game of the season, of course, lost 2-1 against Man City though. So they're in pretty dire form, to be fair. So in that sense, it may be the ideal opponent to face. In other sense, maybe not, because they will come to White Hart Lane. I don't think they're going to... David Moyes' side, I can't imagine them playing free-flowing attacking football against Spurs, but you never know. Let's get some predictions, shall we, from the lads on this one. Game number 5 of the Premier League season. John, now, Sunderland are getting it on Sunday, but by how many?
I'll go 4-1.
You sure about that? 4-1. So that would be a lovely way to get over Wembley, wouldn't it? 4-1. Rick, your prediction?
I'm going to say 4-1 as well.
Jay, so you predicting a big win?
Yeah, I'll go 3-0.
Brilliant stuff. And some nice optimism to finish on, because the lads will tell you before the podcast. But no, it's lovely to have some optimism, and let's hope on Sunday we get a nice win. I'm going to say 2-0. I'm not going to be as bold as the lads, but I think they will win it, and that would be a lovely way to round off the week. Listen, thanks again, guys, for getting in touch with the e-Spurs podcast each and every week on Twitter and Facebook. We'd also really appreciate it if you enjoy what you hear, if you left a review on our iTunes page. That's just go to iTunes on your devices, on your computer, and search for e-Spurs. The e-Spurs podcast will come up. You'll see our feed on there, and you can leave a little review at the bottom. We'd really appreciate any reviews that are left on there. On behalf of Jason, John and Ricky, have a great week, and as always, come on you Spurs.
Do it again.